Hey guys, today we're going to talk about figures of speech. We're going to focus on the figures of speech in Act 1, but do understand that figures of speech are everywhere in our play. We're going to go over some examples from Act 1, but understand too that our examples are not an exhaustive list. There are other examples of the figures of speech that we'll talk about. So if I focus on anything, I would probably focus on concept, really understanding what the concepts mean. For example, what a metaphor is, what a simile is, what an oxymoron is, so that you can recognize the figures of speech regardless of whether it's an example we've gone over or not. So there was a document attached to this assignment, so make sure you have that document pulled up so that you can be typing the answers to the questions as we go along. And at the end of the video, don't forget to submit that document as evidence that you've done the assignment so that you'll get your participation grade. So let's start off. Question number 1 says the play is a paradox in its overall structure. How so? So you need to understand what a paradox is. So it is something that appears to be a contradiction, but it's actually true. So how is a paradox different from an oxymoron, which we learned about in the sonnet video? So an oxymoron would be opposite terms that are brought together. A paradox is going to be a sentence or sentences or even an idea that appears contradictory but in actuality is true. So the question says that the play is a paradox in its overall structure. So we want to look at the beginning of the play and the very end of the play. So our play opens with 2 servants of the house of Capulet joking around. So our play begins comically. Our play ends with the death of not just the 2 lovers, Romeo and Juliet, but of others as well. I won't give away any plot. We all know that Romeo and Juliet die, so that's not a giveaway. But there are other deaths. Remember, this is a tragedy, so death is everywhere. So the play begins comically, ends tragically, making it paradoxical in its overall structure. So question number 2 asks, what figures of speech does Romeo use in the scene with Benvolio to show the contradictory nature of love? So I want to point your attention to page 611, and when you see me looking down, I'm looking down at my book. Remember, Benvolio has been tasked with finding out why Romeo is down in the dumps. And he discovers that Romeo has an unrequited love, which means Romeo loves somebody, but that somebody does not love him back. And we find out that the girl that he is in love with is named Rosaline, and she has become a servant of Diana, the goddess of chastity. So she has no plans to fall in love with Romeo or anyone else for that matter. So Benvolio and Romeo have a conversation where Romeo is trying to explain how it is that love, which is supposed to be so wonderful, so tender, can be so brutal, so difficult, so hard. So the whole conversation is a paradox because love is supposed to be wonderful, and yet it can bring about such pain. So the conversation is a paradox, and within that conversation, Romeo uses a series of oxymorons to try to explain how this can be so about love. How can it be both things at once? So on page 611, beginning in line 175, we have Romeo calling love brawling. He says in line 175, oh, brawling love, that's an oxymoron. Oh, loving hate, that's an oxymoron. Anything of nothing, that's an oxymoron. Heavy likeness, serious vanity, misshapen chaos, feather of lead, bright smoke, cold fire, sick health, still waking sleep. All of those are oxymorons that Romeo uses to try to help explain how love can have this dual role of being wonderful and yet also being painful. He then uses metaphors in which he juxtaposes opposites to try to explain the nature of love. Still on page 611, jump down to line 189, where he says, love is a smoke made with the fume of sighs. So lovers are often known to sigh, either for good or for ill. And so those sighs make smoke. Love is a smoke coming from those sighs. So a really nice metaphor there. He also says in line 190 that love is a fire. In line 191, love is a sea filled up with tears that lovers cry. And again, you can cry tears of joy or you can cry tears of pain. The tears are salty either way, and those salty tears are so profuse that they make a sea. What else is love? This is line 192. It's a madness. It's a choking gall. It is a preserving sweet. So remember, a metaphor is a comparison between two things, and he is calling love a preserving sweet, but also a choking gall, so something bitter and also something sweet. So Romeo trying to explain the dual nature of love, how it can be wonderful and painful at the same time. So remember, the whole conversation is a paradox, and he uses oxymorons and metaphors to help us understand how this can be so. Benvolio definitely seems to get it. All right, let's look at question number 3. Hey, Susie. Let's examine Romeo's speech when he sees Juliet at the party. So this is page 624. So turn to page 624. And Romeo falls in love with Juliet from across the crowded party room. And when he sees her, he makes these wonderful comparisons. So I'm on page 624 looking at line 45. He says, and he's trying to explain Juliet's beauty in these comparisons. That's what he's trying to get across. So I love that Shakespeare has these difficult concepts that he tries to explain by means of comparison. So he uses things that we're familiar with to try to help explain something that we may not be as familiar with. So he's trying to explain here Juliet's beauty. We're not familiar with that, so let's listen to Romeo as he tries to tell us what she's like. So in line 45, it says, "Oh, she doth teach the torches to burn bright. It seems she hangs upon the cheek of night as a rich jewel in an Ethiop's ear. Beauty too rich for use, for earth too dear. So shows a snowy dove trooping with crows, as yonder lady or her fellows shows." So in that first line that I read, line 45, she is a teacher of torches because she is bright like light. And she is so bright that she is able to teach torches how to burn bright. So a nice comparison of her to light itself. In that second line, line 46, she hangs upon the cheek of night as a rich jewel. So a really nice simile here. And remember, a simile is a comparison using like or as. So she hangs upon the night as a rich jewel. And you know, jewels catch light. They reflect light so that they sparkle. So a really nice comparison here. She is as beautiful as a rich jewel sparkling in the light. And then the last comparison that he makes in line 49, she is a snowy dove trooping with crows. So a dove is white, crows are black. Look at how much she stands out over and above these other women. So that's the comparison that he's making there. So simile and two different metaphors to try to help us understand Juliet's beauty. Don't forget the one that's comparing her to light, because this is actually the beginning of light imagery that is used throughout the entire play. So I'll mention it when it comes up again, but don't forget, light imagery is really important in trying to help us understand how Romeo conceives Juliet. All right, let's take a look at number 4. It says define illusion and then explain the mythical illusion Lord Montague uses in Act 1, Scene 1, line 133. So that is going to be on page 609. So flip back to page 609. So Lord Montague here is trying to figure out what's bothering Romeo, and he's talking about how he has seen Romeo moping around, avoiding the daylight, basically, choosing the dark places because the dark places seem to match his dark brooding. So we're actually going to start on page 608 in line 130. And as I read, see if you hear the mythical illusion. An illusion is a reference to something with which the audience would be familiar. So make sure you write down that definition. It's a reference to something with which the audience would be familiar. Now, the audience would definitely know their Greek mythology. Remember, this is an Elizabethan audience, not as far removed from Greek mythology as we are. So they would know their mythology. So see if you can hear the mythological illusion. Lord Montague says in line 130, many a morning hath he there been seen, with tears augmenting the fresh morning's dew, adding to clouds more clouds with his deep sighs. But all too soon as the all-cheering sun should in the farthest east begin to draw the shady curtains from Aurora's bed, away from light steals home my heavy son, and private in his chamber pens himself, shuts up his windows, locks fair daylight out, and makes himself an artificial night. Black and portentous must this humor prove, unless good counsel may the cause remove. So I'm sure you heard it in line 135, the reference to Aurora, who is goddess of the dawn. So basically what he's saying is that in the morning, when dawn wakes up and the sun pulls the curtains from her bed so that she can get out of bed, she can get up in the morning. When dawn comes, Romeo seeks dark places. So a nice mythical illusion in that line. All right, our last question is about puns. There are puns everywhere in this play. Romeo enjoys punning with his friends. Juliet is quick-witted. She likes to pun even with Romeo. So watch for these everywhere. Some of my favorites, page 619. When Romeo is with his buddies and they're headed to the banquet, there's quite a bit of punning. On page 619, take a look at line 14. You have dancing shoes with nimble soles. I have a soul of lead. So a pun is a play on words where a word can sound the same but have different meanings. So there's a play on sole, the sole of your shoe, S-O-L-E, and soul, S-O-U-L, a soul of lead, which is how Romeo is feeling headed to the party. You have nimble souls. You guys are going to dance and have a good time. I have a soul of lead. So stakes me to the ground I cannot move. I don't feel like dancing. That's basically what he's saying. Line 19. I'm too sore and pierced with his shaft, to soar with his light feathers. So a pun on the word soar. And so bound, I cannot bound a pitch above dull woe. So another pun there. And then if we turn the page, on page 620, we see that there's a pun in line 40 and line 39. The game was ne'er so fair, and I am done. Tut, done's the mouse, the constable's own word. So Mercutio picks up on the word done and makes a pun on that word. So another favorite area of punning is on page 612, and we'll close with this. So Benvolio, when he's trying to find out what's bothering Romeo, and they're talking about how Romeo is in love and yet his love is unrequited, there is a really nice punning conversation that they have that's based on an extended metaphor. So they're basically comparing falling in love to a battle between Cupid and Diana. So up at the top of the page in line, let's see, we'll start in line 201. Bid a sick man in sadness make his will. Ah, word ill-urged to one that is so ill. In sadness, cousin, I do love a woman. And here's where Benvolio starts the punning on the comparison. I aimed so near when I suppose you loved. A right good markman, and she's fair I love. A right fair mark, fair coz, is soonest hit. Well, in that hit you miss. She'll not be hit with Cupid's arrow, she hath Diana's wit. Mythical allusion there to the goddess Diana. And in strong proof of chastity well armed, from love's weak childish bow she lives uncharmed. She will not stay the siege of loving terms, nor bide the encounter of assailing eyes, nor ope her lap to saint-seducing gold. Oh, she is rich in beauty, only poor, that when she dies, with beauty dies her store. So a nice comparison to Cupid versus Diana. They're battling it out. Whoever wins or loses will be based on whether Cupid's arrow hits its mark. So punning there on some battle terminology and a nice, funny play on words conversation between the two guys. So look for puns elsewhere in the play. And that is all for now on Figures of Speech. Thanks.